as we have this intellectual discussion. I just feel like y'all need to keep that in mind. That's hard work. I have a lot that I want to talk about, but first, why don't we, as you just said, wet their whistle with a page or two from the essay about Star Trek and Sex and the City, if you'd be so kind.
That's right. This one's called Stardate. I'm just going to read a tiny bit from the beginning. I remember when I learned that my generation would be called the millennials. As a teenager, I scoffed at the thought that this term would ever be widely used. Yes, my childhood was marked by the turning of the millennium. I listened to the album Millennium by the Backstreet Boys thousands of times and watched the slime drop on Nickelodeon on December 31st, 1999, with millions of other children I was not yet thinking of as sharing my demographic. Millennial has an apocalyptic ring, invoking the wacky fundamentalist Christians who invaded Massachusetts 400 years ago and in some ways started this whole unhinged American project. Yes, my adolescence was marked by apocalyptic thinking, since right after this hyped-up milestone for the Gregorian calendar, we descended into a decade of militarism, patriotic paranoia, evangelical fervor, and cultural barrenness. That was also the decade the winters started getting shorter. I saw it with my own eyes. No snow until January. Then I was young. The things I liked were the things young people liked. It had not yet occurred to me that there would be people even younger who would have their own icons and crazes, and that people my age would just be another generalizable slice on the pie chart. When millennials became the villains of every trend piece, I felt an itchy despair that has only broadened as we transform from pesky kids to underachieving 30-somethings. There's something humiliating about being a product of history. Generational thinking means not even your trauma is your own. And what you love is not a product of personal taste, but ever more sophisticated and invasive kinds of marketing. I rarely feel more like a millennial than when I'm streaming TV, particularly on a laptop, in the prone position in bed. Streaming is an apt dystopian metaphor, indicating a passive flow of consumption with no beginning and no end. Between 2017 and 2020, I moved from Boston to Memphis, got married, got a full-time job, and published a book. My material circumstances were changed, but my physical attitude was the same. You could find me flat in the prone position, with my laptop resting on my hip or even my chest, zapping 90s TV shows directly into my brain. I'll leave it there.
Oh, that was so wonderful. It was my whistle. I hope that worked the same for you. So I feel like I'm so glad that we got to hear you read, because I know that when I think of the term cultural criticism, which is what this book is and where you'll find it, in bookstores like this, I think of like Zizek or like French people, and I get really intimidated. And even when I got the galley from our shared publisher, I was like, okay, so you have to put on your smart pants before you start this. But it is, I just devoured it, because it really is like listening to your smartest friend talk about like all of the junk that you've taken in from the culture and are kind of a little bit ashamed about, but like take up a lot of rent-free space in your brain. And like the brilliance and the accessibility go hand in hand. And I think like that is, as a millennial woman especially, I feel like you were really writing to me. And that is a rare feeling, because we don't have like a lot of content besides like yogurt commercials and like vitamins that are for us. And this is just like so smart. So I want to talk, because this is a book of 7 essays, we're not going to be able to talk about all of the ideas in here, and part of the treat of buying this book will be you'll encountering Alice's ideas on your own, but there are some through lines that I want to talk about, which you lay out in the introduction. So you talk about how kind of the main kind of overarching ideas of the book are cults. Cults come up a bunch of times. Corporate thought control also comes up a bunch of times. The end of the world as we know it. And I want to say that kind of dovetails into the end of feminism as we know it. So maybe it would be helpful to kind of ground the conversation to talk about what you see as defining post-feminism for people, which is something that I had never heard of until encountered the book and how that's intersected in the last few decades with neoliberalism.
Yeah, so post-feminism is a really big theme in the book. As kind of a system of ideas that stands in for feminism. I mean, I think it can be defined in a lot of different ways, and I've also heard people talk about third wave feminism in the same way that you might talk about post-feminism, but I think especially in the 90s, post-feminism kind of became a really strong thread in the culture, and it still is, in terms of stuff you could talk about as girl power or a kind of sort of pseudo-feminist marketing, you know, co-opting the ideas of feminism, which started as this radical movement, you know, for liberation, to be something that sells products to, you know, mostly women. And I mean, it really still is, and I think a big part of what I'm examining here is how so much feminism now is really post-feminism. I mean, because it's like, I don't think I'm writing at the end of feminism. I think feminism is very much alive and very necessary, but I think it's interesting to think about where we're at with feminism, how the different waves are crashing, and what needs to happen next. But in that way, you know, confronting post-feminism, like even, you know, Beyonce standing in front of the big feminist sign. It's not like I'm like, hey, don't do that, Beyonce. Like, I mean, at the time it was like, whoa, this is amazing, this is so cool, as a term that was completely marginalized, you know, really until then. But then you also start to think about, okay, well, are public figures who are really rich and powerful, you know, who are still sort of maybe pushing capitalist ideas, pushing, you know, ways of looking that are very standardized, are they really using that term in the same ways that radical feminist thinkers were, or are they co-opting it to sell us things? So, I mean, it's something, it's not exactly that I want to police the use of the term feminist, but it's more that I'm sort of examining kind of, I don't know, where we are with feminism right now, especially as we're sort of in this, like, I mean, I talk about it as like the post-feminist apocalypse, essentially, like how low we've sunk, really. So yeah, I don't know, that is depressing, but
I want to jump in because this is, I think, one of my favorite lines in the book is when you're talking about the post-feminist apocalypse and you talk about Amy Coney Barrett riding in on her black stallion, and how women in, you know, post-feminism or in late capitalism are now, as they always have been, kind of deputized to aid in their own oppression. Mm-hmm. And you examine that through NXIVM, through Amy Coney Barrett, and then I don't know if you have seen The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives.
Oh, well.
Because I hope we can get to that tonight.
Yes, I mean, I'm aware, I haven't watched the show.
Oh, I feel like
I don't know how to put it, but I'm pretty interested in Mormonism. So I am aware of the mom talk goings on.
Indeed.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's something that, like it's something I write about in the book, that when Amy Coney Barrett was nominated, there were Republicans who said, like, where are the feminists? Why aren't you celebrating this woman who's being nominated? You know, and that, you know, that led directly to Roe versus Wade being overturned. So, I mean, that really is, it's a perfect encapsulation of the ways that feminism is being used as a, you know, a smokescreen or as a marketing tactic rather than an actual philosophy.
And because I didn't know this, can you talk a little bit about the cult that Amy Coney Barrett's in?
Oh my God, the People of Praise.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they're basically like charismatic Catholics. It's almost kind of like a syncretic, weird, like Pentecostal Catholic sect. And they like speak in tongues and stuff like that, which is, I don't know, that's neither here nor there really, but they're like, I mean, it was famous, like, especially when she was being nominated, kind of came out that women in there were called handmaids, so which they changed for for some reason. But they have, this concept that's actually, it's not unheard of, I guess, in fundamentalist Christianity, where every person is headed by someone else. You have your headship, and so if you're a woman married to a man, your man is your head, so your boss basically, is your authority. If you're a daughter who's unmarried, then your dad is your authority, and then but they also are like, but men have authorities too, like priests, whoever. So I mean, it's really, it's kind of borrowed, I feel like, from fundamentalist Protestantism, really, like this idea of this chain of command, this patriarchal chain of command that's very, it's not just implied, like it's explicit. But yeah, I mean, it did get coverage when she got nominated, but I think we're all so inured to these like crazy, these sort of culty groups that at this point it's like, throw it on the file. And
Yeah, that was, I mean, because I feel like maybe when that news cycle was happening, it was also like Trump was maybe gonna die of COVID. And
yeah, it was September 2020, just about, yeah.
Yeah, because her confirmation was like a super spreader event. So yeah,
I remember that.
Yeah, but I think the reason why maybe I cottoned on so much to this idea of the post-feminist apocalypse was because you talk about how one of the ways that the rhetoric has been degraded is through social media, and that made me think about Mom Talk, which I'm sure you've seen, where like you have these like basically Mormon women who are subservient to their husbands in very alarming ways, talking about how they're smashing the patriarchy while selling you vibrators that they're not allowed to use. So like how does like, can you talk a little bit about the cult of personal branding? Because you mentioned this multiple times in the book, but like Paris Hilton is a great example of that's her cult or her religion.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, it's very much like the internet, and it's only more and more with social media. Like, it's a world of marketing. It's completely constructed to sell us things. It's owned by the largest companies in the world, like the people with the most money in the world. And it's really it's like being at the mall all the time. It's like, but even kind of more. I always thought that was interesting, like when I first watched like beauty YouTubers, like in 2014 or something, where they would be talking about, like I remember one girl, the first girl who I ever watched, her like bio said like, just a girl who likes products. And it's like Juicy Couture, it was nice girls who like stuff. But I remember being really confused, like why are they doing this? Like why are they selling these products to me out of why do they have this passion for products, and I really found that quite puzzling in a way, but you do see that, okay, well, they're making money from selling the products, obviously, it's a big business for them as well, and they sell the products through creating this personality, this cult of personality, and this trust, among their followers, so that there's this bizarre, like, elision between friendship and, like, salesmanship. But yeah, I think this is where I was saying how Carmen Maria Machado, her blurb said like a gut churning ride through the hell of millennial girlhood, and I was like, I think it's fun. But then when I start talking about it, I'm like, yeah, I guess this is all pretty dark stuff. But like when you bring religion into it, like with the Mormon wives, or like with other like Christian influencers, right, like it does become even more kind of absurd, the ways that they really are using this other brand, Jesus, amazing brand, to sell themselves. They're doing brand synergy, like with God and Jesus, like and it's very cynical, like, and they might think it isn't cynical, but it is. Like, this is like, and it's an MLM model essentially of religion.
Yeah, it's making me think about how, even as, like in the case of NXIVM, those of you who don't know, or how many of you don't know what NXIVM is? Okay, great. So I will do the context. It was a cult in Albany, New York, which was supposed to become the next Rome, based on Keith Raniere, the founder, and it was essentially an MLM for like similar to other like self-improvement MLMs, but this one had a shady underbelly of a sex cult in which women were deputized to kind of enslave, and they use that term, slaves, other women. And the guy got in big trouble for sex trafficking, went to prison, and so did some of his female deputies. So that is the subject of one of the essays, and I was very fascinated when it came up. But one of the things that I think you do so well is, you make sure that we're not just othering these women. Are like, oh well, they've got their problems, and they're getting deputized into their own oppression, and you talk about your own complicity in that, I think, really beautifully when you talk about your Fitbit.
Oh. Oh yes.
Talk to us about how you aided your oppressors with your Fitbit craze.
Yeah, I had a really, really bad time in my life where I was addicted to my Fitbit. But I mean, it was exercise addiction. Like, what else is new? But I think that's like the subject of the first essay in the book, Enumerated Women, which is about kind of self-optimizing, about those kind of health data that is sort of become really the backdrop of so many people's lives, like with the iPhone, even, all of our phones have step trackers on them. And so it's kind of became something that you can't opt out of. I mean, you can. I could show you how, but it's actually not that easy. But once I was kind of off the merry-go-round, like not using my Fitbit anymore, kind of realizing that it was driving me cuckoo, I realized how scary it is that we're seeding so much information about our, most personal data, medical data, to these giant corporations who actually will not tell you how they're using that information, and oftentimes are selling it or using it for, some weird purposes. So, and that, this kind of tracking data, it's used in warehouses, in factories, it's used to, track workers' movements. So it was kind of a thing where I realized, like, oh, I'm basically like donating my labor, like my exercise, to, optimize these like computer programs for the most wealthy people in the world. Like, and that it was something that I was doing so, enthusiastically. Like, I was having so much fun with it. Like, it did become like, oh, like, maybe I drank the Kool-Aid,
Well, like, I think it's in that essay that you say that, no sci-fi writer would have imagined in like the battle between humans and robots that humans would lose because we would just so gladly hand our autonomy over to robots voluntarily.
Right. Well, that it's, like, I think that there is a thread in the book about like tech mysticism, like how much we love computers and really have kind of a worshipful and, adoration for them and for what they can do. And it isn't to say, like, I mean, I think tech is important. I think we should use it for better purposes. But, like, even these ideas, like, that we will all someday upload our consciousness to the cloud, and ascend. Like, those are theological ideas, They're not, like, that's not going to happen. Sorry. But, like, at least, at this point, computers are so, like, compared to a human brain and the things that even the dumbest people on Earth do, completely automatically with their human brains, the amount of processing that they're doing, a computer couldn't even come close, but we have these metaphors of thinking that are like computing, like downloading information. That's what they would say in Nexium, that the cult leader, his deputies were getting downloads of information, and other cults say this too. But, or that our memories are like files, where it's actually like, computers are such shitty facsimiles of human brains, but we're starting to think of it as if our brains are facsimiles of computers.
Yeah, that makes me I feel like another thread in the book, which I conned onto, and there are other threads in this book besides feminism, but so still these, so I.
It's a big one.
It's a big one. So we will get to that other stuff, but in your essay, there's an essay called Star Date, which I just learned that Dan Hornsby came up with. Great title.
Yeah.
Where you talk about Star Trek and Sex and the City side by side. An unlikely couple, but it turns out very well paired. And one of the things, and this essay I've been thinking about for days and days after reading it, because you write, the quote is, "In the struggle between modernity and tradition, women's roles and bodies are the concession we make to the past." And one of the examples you point out in that is your friend who watches Star Trek, oh yeah, okay, one of these, oh yeah, is like, I guess in one of the series, there's a woman who's heavily pregnant throughout the series, and you are like, really, it's hundreds of years later, and women are still gestating for 9 months in the normal way, like everyone else.
On a starship.
On a starship, like no one thought to kind of amend that or like use technology to, emancipate women's bodies. Yeah, I mean, I think, and then so you also say women deserve freedom only if they can afford it. So why and how is technology always, relegating us back to handmaids?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something it's a pattern that becomes really obvious once you look for it. Even like futurologists like Alvin Tostick, like in the middle of the 20th century, who were worried about technology like moving too fast and things were going crazy. Like some people he was associated with, their image like of their kind of like sort of anti-futurist, anti-modernist thing was a pregnant woman, or maybe like a woman breastfeeding. So it becomes this, women's bodies are a symbol of what's natural, of the old ways, and even you see this with like the attacks on IVF. When the oldest test tube baby is like our age, she's older than us probably. So it's not really even something that's that new. But I think it's something that people are willing to concede so much about our daily lives, to let so many things change, to let our communities be destroyed, to let our, extended families grow apart, our whole networks. But the idea of, a woman, like, there being like an external womb, or, even surrogacy is like an example of like privilege, like that rich people can afford to do it, is something that's disturbing for people. And I mean, it's something really actually when I was writing the book that I started to kind of come down on the side of like, why is it that we have so much piety about certain parts of the natural human process and about our own bodies and body modification, but we, are completely okay with other kinds, that it was something that was so clearly rooted in all of these ideas that were not really, it's not about like science or safety, or it's much more about our ideologies about gender and
right,
whatever.
Like an old man messing with his body so he can live forever. We're just like, oh, he is a genius. Yeah. He is leading the frontier, and a woman being like, I'd like to be pregnant for 3 months instead of 9.
Right.
It's like,
Well, I mean, or like not, to go there, but like, or a trans person who wants to alter their body, or I mean, the idea that the only kind of plastic surgery that we want to legislate is the kind on people's genitals. Like anything else, it's like, go for it, buddy. That is, it's silly. Like ultimately, I mean, it's not trivial, but it's something that is so much more to do with these, kind of anti-modern fears that people have.
Yeah, and I'm going to bring it up again, I'm so sorry, but in The Secret Lives of Modern Wives, again, I'm reading these texts at the same time, and so this exactly what you said came up in that, they're like, we don't have sex till marriage, but then you're supposed to be a porn star, and we don't drink coffee, we don't drink alcohol, and then they are blowing up ketamine like all the time, and then getting Botox and fillers for the laughing gas, because there are all these loopholes in cultish piety, you know, which I think, and like as long as I feel like it makes you hot and relaxed as a woman, the guy's like, okay, right, sure, you can mess with your body like that. Okay, I am going to circle back to feminism because we are going to have to talk about Hugh Hefner at some point. But let's take a jolly little detour into the world of Animal Crossing.
Oh God. Okay.
So which is a game I never played, and so I encountered it only through your eyes. Can you talk about your journey into, and out of Animal Crossing, and like how you started the game, how you thought about the game beginning, and how you kind of came out the other side thinking about it, because I think it's quite different.
Yeah, so I mean, Animal Crossing, it's a game, it's a Japanese Nintendo game, very, very cute, it's for children. That the most recent, iteration of it came out like in April 2020, so I was staying at home, I was, teaching online, and I became almost immediately addicted, like hours and hours every day for months playing this game. And I mean, it's kind of like, I don't know, you could call it like a reality simulator, like The Sims or something. Like you're not doing quests or whatever. It's more like planting your flowers, going and talking to your neighbors, building your house, like buying stuff, because you can buy so much stuff in this game. You have a phone in the game where you can shop online. And there are stores in the game, there's other ways you can get stuff. So just acquiring items, and eventually, well, I don't want to get into the details of why, but eventually I did kind of get burnt out on it the first time, back in 2020. And then a few years later, we had moved here, I got COVID, and I was like, well, the Switch is sitting right there, powered it on again, and it was even worse the second time, like just insane, all day, every day, kind of binges of playing this game.
Well, because there's a lot of work to do. You said it took 3 hours to get through your daily routine.
Well, if you're being as thorough as I was, just doing every single thing that you can do in the game, yeah, I think, and it really disturbed me even when I was playing it, like, why am I doing this? What am I getting out of it? And even like, what's the message? What am I learning from this game? Because games are teaching tools, like, that's what elementary school is, like, all games are there to teach you. And usually what they're teaching you is how to play the game well, But I was thinking, like, what am I being instructed in? Like, what kind of hamster, like, maze am I running? But actually, what really got me out of it the second time was I found like these fan communities online where people were building stuff that was like, oh my god, it's so beautiful, I've never seen anything like this. Where I had just been playing it really like a little like robot, kind of like shake the tree, oh I get my prize, do 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 do, like just doing all the stuff you're supposed to do, like catching fish, like. And then I see that people were playing it in the ways that were so much more creative and collaborative, and building things like beautiful artistic monuments like within this game, that I had never even imagined was possible, And also finding out that there are all these collaborative things like where you could get all the items for free, where I don't know, I go into it in the book, but basically where all these people had conspired to just give away all the stuff in the world for free, and then you don't have to fish for stuff on the dock, like you don't have to shake the trees every day, like they had kind of circumscribed like that part of the game making it something like that was so much more interesting and cool and special. And it was a way of me to see that, because it's something that I talk about in the book, but like where people talk about it like it's only a game. And to me, I was like, it's not just a game. That I had started to kind of believe in the game in a weird way, like I bought into it. And that when I could see the ways that other people had broken the rules of the game to create kind of a different game, a better game, like a meta game, then I could see like, oh yeah, it is. It's just a game. Like I'm free. I have free will, maybe. Yeah. So and that kind of that started to set me free.
I feel like it's almost a metonym for one of the issues that's so often brought up in the book, and that is corporate thought control. Like in some ways, you were being not by Nintendo, but then also the corporation within Animal Crossing.
Right.
What's that called?
Nook Inc.
Yeah, Nook Inc. It's like you were devoted to the capitalist tenets of Nook Inc. and then this anarchist revolution sort of took place despite Nintendo in the fan community.
Right, and Nintendo didn't like it that it was happening, and they did crack down on some people, but I think eventually they saw like there's nothing we can do about this. Like this is what people are going to do. And then people would hack their Switches, they would mod the Switch. Like there were kind of extreme sort of ways people were getting around the rules of the game. But yeah, I mean, I think even within the game, it's obvious that like Nook Inc. and Nintendo are like Nintendo's like the parent company. Like there's like a strange connection there. But yeah, because it's like I'm a thoughtful person, you know? Like even as I was playing, I would be like, whew, these neoliberal values are crazy. You know, but I'm just like, you know, but I still have to shake all my trees. Cut them down. Like, you know, that, I mean, yeah, it did feel it felt very similar to like the like no ethical consumption under capitalism kind of like way of going about life. Like that you feel like even if you can recognize this ideology that you're trapped in, you still are, you know, a rat in the maze. Like you're still playing the game.
And then you found these fan communities that sort of, that unhooked you from all of that, which I think is so much of what I myself am certainly looking for, but I imagine other people are looking for in our world too. And I think in reading this book, by having you articulate things so clearly to me, at least in moments, I felt myself unhooked from the rat maze, and I was like, this is all so stupid.
Yeah.
You know, like.
Well, and even that I think like video game addiction is really interesting to me because it's something a lot of people deal with and don't talk about. But that it's not that I think that like that video games in themselves are destructive inherently.
Yeah.
And I think actually there's a lot of opportunity for creativity, collaboration, to make community, to make friends within the world of a game, especially for people who are isolated. But it is about changing the way that we play.
Yeah. And it's like, I love that. And I'm going to leave that there. I want to talk a little bit about the process of writing this book and sort of the backdrop of your life. This book, you wrote it over 5-6 years, and you know, these ideas took a long time to gestate, but most certainly intended. You know, you're trying to, it seems, I imagine it must have been very hard to try to pin the tail on the donkey of culture in this period of kind of hypermania of everything changing so often, and as well as having to just be a person living your life, having family you love go through stuff. Can you talk about what your process was like a little bit?
Yeah, it was really, really hard. I mean, I sold the book in 2019, so then, and I kind of was like, it's gonna be about magazines and, you know, nostalgic stuff. And then it was like, oh, the world has gone very dark indeed. And so many things kind of, like, I finished the book, like, literally turned in the last draft on, like, the last pass of the final pass on the day before Trump was elected a second time. So then I had to email my editor the next day and be like, maybe I could go in and tweak a few things. So it really was like, things were changing so quickly, culture was changing quickly, things would become kind of irrelevant under my feet as I was writing about them. And it was incredibly hard to kind of try to find my footing or figure out what the book was really about, or, you know, what the elevator pitch was going to be, because it was like, well, it's about now, but it's also about the past. Like the present kept kind of, I don't know, butting in when I would try to write about the past, and sort of vice versa. Yeah, I don't know if that's that, but I don't know. It was very difficult to write. It took a very long time, and I really would, I despaired a lot. Like I would, at 11:11, I would wish to finish my book. And that's not a joke at all. I really was like, I was praying. I kind of thought, like, am I a failure? Like, am I going to fail? Is this book ever going to get written and going to come out? Because even like the Playboy essay, which is like over 100 pages, that was the last thing I wrote for the book, the last essay, and I proposed. My editor was like, I think you need like 1 or 2 more essays. And I was like, cool, I'll write one that's like 2,000 words about Playboy. 20,000 words later, like everything just kind of snowballed out of control, like with this book, I feel like.
I'm so glad you led us there, because I think maybe it'll be the last question that I ask before we open it up. And to me, I think that the last essay is called Rabbit Hole. Okay, not Down the Rabbit Hole, which is a memoir by a former playmate, which you talk about a lot. But I feel like, I don't know if I could put it into words, but I think Playboy perfectly encapsulates what your book is about. From the bunny tattoo that a lot of the playmates were voluntarily branded with, which is what they called it, to Hugh Hefner's invention of the personal brand, to the sort of corporate thought control that kind of hoodwinked a large percentage of the American population into thinking that he was kind of a benevolent and playful, king in his kingdom, when really he was truly a monster, So why did you want to write a Playboy in the first place? And how, I know how you did it, but what made you go 20,000 words deep?
Great question. I feel like, the reason I wanted to write about Playboy was because of these books by Holly Madison, who was his main girlfriend when I was a kid. She was on the show The Girls Next Door that was on E!
I love
that I used to watch all the time as a little child. And her books are great. Honestly, if you want like a celebrity memoir to like read on a plane or something, like they're very good. But she really gets into it, and they're tell-alls, about her time at the Playboy Mansion that were really enlightening to me, because I feel like I had really bought into this, marketing about Playboy as this like venerable American brand. And even like watching the show, you just think like, oh, these gals are having so much fun with their 80-year-old boyfriend. Wow, how great, that it was portrayed as something that was so innocent, so mainstream, so like normal. And the way that she talks about, the cultish level of control that he had over the women who lived at the mansion, about the sexual abuse that he perpetrated on them, and like just how much this institution, I don't know, I guess I kind of started to think about the ways that I was indoctrinated as a young girl, like into, how it affected the ways I thought about sexuality, the ways I thought about how I looked or should look. Like it was sort of a gateway to thinking about all of that, and to thinking about his relationship with feminism, which is really interesting, honestly. Because feminists, in the 70s, he was like public enemy number 1. They were like, they literally said, Hugh Hefner is my enemy. But he also was like, I'm a feminist. Like, and I think he really succeeded in making a lot of people think that, because of the sort of lefty stuff that Playboy published. So yeah, it kind of just, like, then it became about Gloria Steinem, it became about Marilyn Monroe, it became about, all these things that Playboy touched, because this is a thing that lasted for 75 years. There's like just an insane amount of influence and of, little like the Playboy tentacles are in everything.
I didn't really realize until reading your essay how disturbing it is that, you know, Hugh Hefner had an obsession with Marilyn Monroe and maybe a, you know, fetish, and, you know, she died young, trying to get away, trying to have a more autonomous life than someone like him could ever give her, and then he buried himself next to her.
Yeah,
like,
he bought the
plot
vault
right next to her.
Next to her, yeah.
And it, yeah.
And so they're there now.
Yeah, there they are, not without obviously her consent. So, I mean, that essay is a tour de force. It is 100 pages long, and I will not be thinking the same. And I'm going to tell everyone I know about what sex pest Hugh Hefner was. And it's crazy to me
the stuff he did.
That it took until 2025 for me to be like, this guy's a bad guy. Like, I was just like, I don't know. Some people like that stuff.
Or the idea that I think it was a lot of it to do with, I mean, the way we think about sex workers and sex work in general, that these women chose this, that they put themselves there, that they...
And what did they expect?
Yeah, you know, and so the idea that they were being, you know, there have been exposés, there have been intense exposés of what happened at the Playboy Mansion, but I think people always find ways to say, well, you know, how can you believe these women who were, you know, selling sex, taking off their clothes, whatever, or other, you know, that what else could they expect? Like I think that he knew that he was weaponizing that stigma, and he hated sex workers himself, and it worked. It continues to work, and even after so much has come out about what the things that he did and the ways that just what was going on there was inappropriate for years and years, I think people still discount it and don't really want to see it in the same way as, like, say a church or another
venerable
institution where women are being systematically preyed upon.
Yeah.
Because we want to think, oh, these women chose to put themselves there, they must have wanted it, whatever.
Or oh my gosh, there's so much more I want to say about that, but I do want to make sure that we have time for y'all's questions. So I know some of you maybe have read the book, some of you are just listening now, so please don't be shy. And if you are shy, I have a lot more I want to say about you after, whether you like it or not. Yay, amateurish hero of the party.
Always in with the first question. I have read the book, but I don't think it's a spoiler. I think I actually mentioned this to you, Alice, after I first read it, but one of the things that I found, like, so obvious but also so profound that I began to tell other people as if I had thought of it, was the idea that we, like, with large-scale language learning models or whatever they're called, like, we are creating their intelligence, so to speak, like that quote-unquote intelligence that you were talking about, the facsimile of a brain. Every time we use Google, every time we, like, enter our words into a search engine, and the intelligence that they are using is actually just our collective intelligence. So what we think of as computerized intelligence is actually just us. And I'm thinking about it, like, in terms of the consumption of culture also, because a lot of the things that you discuss, like Star Trek, Sex and the City, Playboy articles, which are, like, really good, you know, or whatever, are things that I enjoy a lot, especially as a millennial. In so many ways, this book feels to me like a millennial classic because everything felt so recognizable. And so as somebody who loves culture and has seen The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, which I know is absolute garbage, like, it is such trash, this is a long-winded way of me asking you, like, am I, in my consumption of culture, essentially creating the culture that I hate, just like we are creating these large language learning model fake intelligences, and, like, as somebody who enjoys consuming culture in a way that I pretend is, like, thoughtful, what do I do?
I mean,
no, I know I'm bad. I'm not worried about if I'm bad, but I'm wondering just, like, how do you think of it? Because you.
I I mean, it is interesting because it's like, that's part of what I think about within this book. I mean, this, thinking about my childhood and about these things that shaped me, in a lot of ways, this popular culture is the water that I swim in. I can't escape it. And so for me, I was like, I'll just write about it. But I think we also can't reproduce I don't know, I think as we're just remixing culture, as we're just consuming the same nostalgic things over and over, we can't really create something new from that. It's the same as AI, like you're talking about, it doesn't come up with anything new, all it does is remix things that are already there. And so, but I mean, I really don't know what do we do? Go live in the woods like Thoreau? I think, I mean, it's honestly not a bad idea, but I think my book's not helping anyone do this, but getting out of this cultural framework and ideology that texts, stories, narratives are all there is of the world, that completely shapes our concept of the world, when actually there are other ways to experience the world, and more direct ways, rather than having this kind of ironic pop cultural framework, which is what the internet is. It's like a filter that helps us see the world and see our fellow man, but it's not I mean, do I know how to do that? No, I mean, I'm working on it, but it's I think, it's always kind of my go-to to be to think about being more thoughtful with our consumption, or having these moments of reckoning with because that's kind of it's kind of like going vegan. I'm a vegetarian, but I used to be vegan, but the best way to go vegan is to just learn a lot about the animal agriculture industry, and then even if you don't tell yourself I'm gonna stop eating meat, then you're I don't really want to do this anymore, and so I think there are ways where when we really are confronted with the damage that something's doing to us or to the world, a lot of the time that dissonance does kind of help unhook us from some of that ideology. But I don't know, man. I mean, that's all I got.
It reminds me of a line in the book, which I am going to butcher, but you say something like tech is really good at kind of giving us salves or ways to escape our problems. It is not good at solving the problems because they created the problems.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, that's marketing for you,
Yeah.
creating problems to solve,
Yeah, right. What is it? It's the Churchill Lenny quote, never let a crisis go to waste.
Right.
And I feel the crisis on workers everywhere, or the middle class in this country, or mothers, any caregivers. It's oh yeah, of course you want to go watch The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, or binge Friends, Gen Z's obsessions with Friends.
It's you remove the real friends
Yeah.
and the actual human connection, and then be want to watch Friends?
yeah, totally. What it also reminds me of what Chekhov said, that a writer's job is not to solve a problem, but to state the problem correctly. And I do feel that's what you do.
I've always said that.
That's yeah.
Totally.
Other questions?
Josh?
Yeah, thank you. I haven't had a chance to read it, but I'm excited. I mean,
Well, it came out yesterday, so
yeah.
it's okay.
I will. I was really intrigued by the Playboy essay. My dad had a stack of Playboys by his chair and only had them for the essays. But no, I mean, when you were talking about it, just I'm like many people obsessed with Trump's impunity and able to, and people talk a lot about how influenced he was by his experiences with wrestling and so forth. And I was just thinking as you were talking, is there a way in which the Hugh Hefner stories really is sort of the template for Trump and a lot of the people these days, and because when you were describing it was very clear, people have known these things forever, right? But so is there sort of a performative element of Hefner and so forth that sort of
There's a strong connection between Trump and Hefner. I mean, even the Playboy Casino became the Trump Casino,
In Atlantic City.
1-to-1 in Atlantic City, and a lot of the same kinds of, industries, Trump owns beauty pageants, casinos, real estate. I think Hefner will always be seen as a marginal figure. He dreamed of being an American hero, and that's how he saw himself, believe it or not. But he will always be seen as, a pornographer. Some people say, oh yeah, he's one of the great editors, great magazine people. Of course, he still is seen that way, but he will always be seen in this marginal, kind of creepy, seedy way. But that also erases a lot of the huge impact that he had on how we see business and marketing now. And I mean, he literally said, like, I have to become the Playboy. He divorced his wife, he bought like a roadster, and he got TV shows to because he wanted people to see him as the archetypal Playboy, and so that other men would see him and say, yeah, that's what I want to be, I want this mansion filled with beautiful women, I want that car, I want that bathrobe. And I think Trump brands himself in extremely similar ways, having a house, that is kind of gothically associated with you, kind of standing in as your identity. Like the Trump, it's a tower, and he had the Playboy Mansion, and having a look that is very, very distinctive. I think people don't understand that about Trump. Like he looks bad. Why would you choose to look like that? But no one else looks like him. It's a brand. Like, it's like Hugh Hefner. Why would you always be wearing your pajamas? Because no one else does that. Like, that's him. That's his thing. It's what sets him apart. So I think there's an extremely strong connection. I think Trump did study the things that Hefner did, and I think that they were literally connected. I think that they were in the same network, and I think as public figures, public brands, as like American businessman, TM, very similar.
Maybe one more question?
Hi. I also haven't read the book.
It's okay.
But I'm very excited. One thing I was thinking about when you were talking about Playboy and the institutionalization of the normalcy of it, and I'll readily admit that I'm addicted to short form video, but I think it's pretty omnipresent. But there is the ubiquity of sex work in the form of OnlyFans modeling, and the absolute omnipresence of that on the TL, in addition to that sort of constant OnlyFans detected, opinion rejected thing. I'm just wondering about how that's sort of decentralizing that process of the institutionalization of normalcy, and what you make of the idea of that sort of cult of social personality existing without the individual personality of somebody like Hugh Hefner.
Yeah, I think the influencerization of everything is something that's so weird. I mean, because with sex work, you can think about, okay, was being a model who worked for Playboy better than being a model who works for themselves, who has to deal mostly by yourself with creepy men who are, or people probably, who are, messaging you or stalking you or trying to dox you, who have to manage your own money, that you have to kind of become your own business, your own brand. Is that better than working for a predatory company that might not be paying you that well, but at least, maybe you have something of a network, you don't feel so alone. I think it's a real bait and switch. And it's not just, sex work is the red herring of OnlyFans, where being an OnlyFans model is extremely similar to being any other kind of influencer. But where I think the idea, the allure is that you can do it by yourself in your bedroom and you could make, pretty good money. But the idea of doing art, first of all, is having friends, doing it together, having a network, collaborating, connecting with others, So being able to do it by yourself actually isn't necessarily the, draw that it appears to be. But also that a lot of the time we're cutting out predatory industries, which is good. but in order to sort of supplant another predatory industry, which is the social media industry. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's tough because, you know, I read a lot about magazines in the book, and the magazine industry had tons of problems, and it makes a lot of sense that it disappeared, and it's not just because of the internet. It has a lot more to do with the financial crisis and the connection that the magazine industry had with finance, and like the luxury industry. But then you also see this nostalgia that people have for it, for these jobs that writers had, for jobs that editors had, for institutions, you know? So it's something that I think we're in this bizarre transitional phase. I don't think influencering will last forever. I think it's a transitional thing because it can't, you know? Eventually social media will be like, you don't get money to do that anymore. It's kind of almost like a gold, you know, it's a gold rush. And I think it's going to be supplanted by something else. But yeah, I think it's like, you know, old world dying, new world struggling to be born, you know. But no, I don't, I think people like Paris Hilton will put it as I own my own image and I sell my own image and it's so empowering. But it's I think that is definitely, you know, well, I mean, it's just post-feminist rhetoric really, but I don't think it's as empowering as anyone really makes it seem like it is.
All right, just for the sake of time, so you guys can get some books signed, well, let's leave it there. Give a big round of applause for Sally. And thank you, Sally. Truly a pleasure.
You were my dream. And yeah, you can talk to me more over there.
And Dan wanted you to make an announcement, Alice.
Oh yeah, we're gonna go to the Buchner room at the Eagles 34 when I'm done here, so you guys can come say hi.
All right, she'll see you at the signing line.